Trump must understand very clearly what the Russian demands are, the main demands that I just described, and that he must have conveyed to the Russians that we will accept those demands. Otherwise, there's no point in Trump continuing to negotiate with Putin and continuing to talk as if we can cut a deal. So I think what Macron, Starmer, and other Europeans are doing is being very nice to President Trump and telling him that they will make certain concessions here and there. And this is the Europeans talking about making certain concessions on trade and issues like that, so they can stay in the good graces of President Trump and keep the American pacifier over their head. But on the issue of Ukraine, I mean, they surely understand at this point in time that Trump has decided where he's headed, and they're not going to turn that train around. Trump seems to be saying that if Zelensky doesn't agree, if he's going to, cause trouble and make the agreement unworkable, then Trump is going to pull us out. We're out of there, and he's going to leave it to Zelensky to deal with the Russians on his own, or maybe with the Europeans. And I think the belief is that the Ukrainians will quickly realize, and the Europeans will quickly realize, that they're no match for the Russians, and it's time to cut a deal. And if they don't, then Ukraine is going to be further destroyed. I think they understand that there's no way they're going to convince Trump to change course on Ukraine. It's got to be clear to them that the die is cast on that particular issue. I think what they're principally worried about, and it explains why they were so diplomatic, is they don't want to make relations between the United States and Europe any worse than they already are, because they don't want the United States to leave Europe. They don't want NATO to go away. I think the interesting question was the previous question that you raised is, what are we going to do if Ukraine doesn't cooperate? And you were also pointing out that even if Zelensky wanted to cooperate, it may be very difficult for him to do that, given the politics inside of Ukraine. But it's the real wild card here, when all is said and done, I think, is Ukraine. So you want to accept the reality that's facing us and figure out where to go from there. And basically, that leads you to the conclusion that it's best, from our point of view, and here I'm talking about the United States, and it's best from Ukraine's point of view to shut this war down. And if it goes on, what's going to happen? More Ukrainians are going to get killed, and they're going to lose more territory. Is that good? Not in my opinion. In my opinion, from both a moral and a strategic point of view, Trump is on the right track. The fact is that the United States refused to tell Ukraine that it would continue to provide security for it, that it would continue to support it in its war with Russia. So the mineral deal went nowhere. And again, this is why Zelensky is so frustrated today in this press conference before the meeting. Zelensky has no solution. The mineral deal didn't work out the way he wanted. So what is he going to do? And he misbehaved, and we saw the end result. The mineral deal, the whole idea was initiated by Zelensky. And really what he wanted to do was allow the United States to make a lot of money from Ukrainian minerals. And the quid pro quo would be that the United States would continue to provide security for Ukraine. My view is that it is likely that Trump will cut a deal with Trump and company. Surely know what the Russians want. They know what the Russian demands are. And it appears that they're willing to meet those demands. Otherwise, Trump wouldn't be saying that he had a really good conversation with Putin and that they understand each other and that he believes they can get a deal. So I think the deal is going to happen. So Netanyahu may be gloating now, but he ought to think long and hard, as many Israelis and their supporters should think, about where this country is, where it's headed, and what that all adds up to, because this is not good. So the Israelis, they just do what they want. And again, the United States and the Europeans will back them no matter what. So what you see here is creeping annexation. And this is hardly surprising at all. Netanyahu talked about admiration for Israel. When I was young, there was a great deal of admiration for Israel in the United States and really around the world. But what's happened over time, and it's accelerated in the last few years, is that Israel has become a pariah state in almost all quarters. It's really quite remarkable. I believe here, even in the United States, there is a significant slice of the population that fully understands what Israel has become and where Israel is headed. And of course, as I've said on a number of occasions on this show, this situation's only going to get worse with time, because in those days, remember, I was there from 1966 to 1970. And the Israelis won the war in 1948. They won a war in 56, and then they won the 97 war, which was widely viewed as a classic military victory on a par with the German victory against France in 1940. So they were very highly regarded. And furthermore, in those days, the Israelis were considered David up against Goliath, because many of the myths that underpin that David versus Goliath worldview had not been shattered. But since, the early 1970s, my thinking, and I think the thinking of large numbers of people, including many Israelis, about Israel itself has changed. China has grown more powerful economically. It's turned a lot of that economic might into military might. And as you would expect, they're beginning to, throw their weight around. They're acting much the way the United States acts. As you well know, the United States has a Navy that has a significant forward presence, and we're constantly roaming around in the waters right off the coast of countries like China. This is just sort of the normal course of events for us. And what you should expect to happen is, as China gets more powerful, that it's going to build a blue water navy with a lot of power projection capability, and it's going to try to throw its weight around. It's going to try to send signals to the Australians, send signals to the Filipinos that we're in charge here. I think that's a misreading of the Chinese. The Chinese are not a status quo power. They want to dominate the South China Sea, and this explains a lot of what's going on with the Philippines. And they want to reduce American influence as much as possible in East Asia, and if anything, push the Americans beyond the first island chain, then beyond the second island chain. Well, I think it's important to emphasize that the Chinese are hardball players. They are interested in dominating East Asia, just the way the United States dominates the Western Hemisphere. It's commonplace in this country to make the argument that it's the United States the source of all trouble in East Asia, and that the Chinese are basically satisfied with the status quo. And if the Americans would just back off, we could live happily ever after. I think what they're doing is they're asserting their influence in East Asia. Trump makes so many boasts that he doesn't carry through on, that the costs of making these sorts of boasts and then not delivering is not very great. It's like when he says Canada is going to become the 51st state. Who seriously believes that? Or who seriously believes that he's going to turn the Gaza Strip into the Riviera of the Middle East? Even Lindsey Graham has told them that this is a foolish idea. I'm not arguing that there are statements that he makes that are of no consequence at all. Some statements that he makes are of huge consequence. And what he's doing on Ukraine, and in particular what he's doing vis-a-vis Zelensky, is of great consequence. So he just makes these boasts and people don't pay much attention to them. Biden was president when the genocide started, and Biden had all sorts of opportunities to act to stop the genocide and to influence Israeli policy in Gaza in ways that would put an end to the killing. This is not an issue for Trump at this point. Trump is walking into a situation where there is a ceasefire and where the Israelis really don't have an incentive to start up again with the genocide. There's no question that Trump, like Biden, is going to give the Israelis all of the deadly weaponry that they want and that we have, with some small exceptions. So in that sense, there's a continuation. But I think the key point you want to keep in mind is that Trump is operating in a very different environment, strategic environment in the Middle East than Biden was operating in. So the question is, how does Trump operate in that situation, which again is very different than the one that Biden confronted when he was president? Now, Netanyahu may have inclinations in that direction, but I think even he realizes that's not in his interest. His interest is just to make sure you don't have a ceasefire so he can keep his coalition together.